Fubuki Clockford is a character from the video game Master Detective Archives Raincode. She's a master detective that managed to make it into Kanai Ward. Her forte is Time Leap, which is the ability to rewind time. Fubuki is most prominent in Chapter 3 of the game, and she's also somewhat present in Chapter 4. Although she seems like a very simple and forgettable character at first, she actually has a surprising amount of depth to her. So let's dive in and take a closer look at her. Analyzing Fubuki's name for details about her character is not the easiest thing in the world. Her last name, Clockford, is pretty self-explanatory. It has the word clock in it, and clocks are meant to keep track of time. This makes perfect sense because of her forte, and also because her family manages the world's standard of time. Her first name, however, is trickier. It's a Japanese name, but within the game it's only written in katakana, which gives us no hints about its meaning. Fortunately, because it's an actual name, we can look it up. Unfortunately, there's about a dozen different ways to write this name. In looking through all of these different ways to write Fubuki's name, I came across several kanji that appeared multiple times. These were the kanji for wind, blow, dance, and lotus. There was also one way to write it that included the kanji for princess. The concepts of wind and dance could be tied to Fubuki's curious and carefree nature. Princess is also very easy to figure out because she's the heiress to a rich family, and it's also the nickname that Desuhiko calls her. Basically, there's a lot of guesswork with figuring out what meaning Fubuki's name might hold. But overall, based on what I found, it seems to fit her pretty well. First off, I think it's worth saying that I find Fubuki very pretty, and I really like her design. There's a flower in her hair, and it looks like a lotus, which connects back to her name because the kanji for lotus appears in a few of the ways to write it. The lotus flower symbolizes purity, rebirth, and strength. They're known for blooming very clean and pristine, even though they grow in water that's often muddy and murky. The idea of purity could be related to Fubuki's sheltered upbringing that causes her to be kind of naive and unaware of things in the outside world. Viewing the lotus as a symbol of strength also makes sense because she continuously perseveres despite experiencing multiple hardships throughout the game. And as for rebirth, that could be applied to her ultimate decision to reject her family's traditions and continue on her own path. Fubuki's eyes have a diamond design in them. Well, they're technically rhombuses, but whatever. Diamonds are seen as a symbol of wealth and high status because of their very high value, which again ties back to Fubuki's position as an heiress. She also has a whole bunch of piercings, which I think is pretty cool. There's a tattoo on Fubuki's left arm that kind of looks like a shuriken. Shurikens are concealed weapons that are used to distract or misdirect. This tattoo could be related to her forte because it's kind of like a secret weapon, and it's far more powerful than most people might expect from someone like Fubuki. The left edge of her coat has a rewind symbol. It's also present on her left sleeve, but I think that might be only in her illustration and not present on the model. The connection here is very obvious because her forte is literally the ability to rewind time. This could also be referenced in the kind of weird circular arrow on her jacket. Fubuki wears a badge for the WDO, signifying her position as a master detective. She also has a clock necklace, and this necklace is involved in her forte, and the pieces move when she uses it. Fubuki's design is cool. I like it. She's very pretty. Let's move on now. Upon being introduced, Fubuki seems very dumb and airheaded. In the prologue, when she's first seen, she's using chocolates to count the matches for Desuhiko and Halara's game. Well, she's supposed to be. Instead, she keeps eating the chocolates and struggles to count higher than 3. Yeah. At this point, I'm sure we were all wondering how she ever managed to become a master detective. Fubuki's airheadedness persists throughout the game, and at times it's even so absurd that Shinigami even wonders if she's faking it. She frequently misunderstands things or simplifies them to the point of being wrong. When Yuma says they make great partners, she mistakes his words for a marriage proposal. She thinks the ocean is above the clouds because rain falls from the sky. And of course, there is the iconic moment where she said she thought the servants in her home were making fun of her because they called her dummy thick. I still almost can't believe that is actually in the game. Fubuki is also very friendly and easily gets along with other people. She quickly strikes up a friendship with Kurumi after meeting her, and she's even initially polite to and introduces herself to Shinigami. In Chapter 3, she started waiting tables at the cafe because she just felt bad sitting around and doing nothing. Growing up sheltered and unaware, Fubuki is very curious about the outside world, and she wants wants to learn more about it. She loves exploring and going on adventures, and she often sees things as a chance to experience something new. She's shown to be excited about chances to grow and improve, and she's very proud when she feels like she's bettered herself. But Fubuki is also insecure from believing her forte is her only merit. She's perfectly aware of her lack of knowledge and experience, and it makes her feel inadequate. In the Mystery Labyrinth, she feels awful and beats herself up because she can't use her forte. Regardless though, Fubuki is still a detective, and she can be quite sharp. In Chapter 3, she reasons that Shachi's death must be a homicide because it wouldn't really make sense for him to so quickly turn his gun on himself when he could have used it to fight the peacekeepers. I can see how and why people would find Fubuki very tiring and annoying, but I personally never felt that way about her. I think she's very charming, and I enjoyed seeing her gain some strength and motivation throughout the story. Fubuki is first introduced in the prologue along with the rest of the game's main cast. She's not very important in Chapter 1 or 2, but she becomes far more present in Chapter 3. Fubuki's forte helps Yuma evade the peacekeepers and disarm the bombs that he was tricked into planting around Kanai Ward. Unfortunately, she's not involved in the actual investigation for Chapter 3 before she joins for the Mystery Labyrinth. She's initially polite and friendly to Shinigami, but then turns hostile when she starts to believe that Shinigami is some kind of evil force trying to oppose her and Yuma. Fubuki and Shinigami argue and bicker a lot during the Mystery Labyrinth, which is kind of funny, but can also get a little annoying. Otherwise, she's sadly pretty useless throughout the labyrinth. However, this is touched on and used for her development. Fubuki feels useless because her forte can't be used inside the labyrinth. When Shinigami insults Fubuki and calls her a hindrance, she's at first very hurt and discouraged before gaining motivation from Shinigami's words to grow and become stronger. It's also worth noting that she gives Yuma increasingly long and ridiculous titles throughout the labyrinth, which I think is incredibly funny. By the end of the labyrinth, Fubuki has realized that Shinigami was trying to help Yuma, and that the two share a very strong bond of trust. She apologizes for being rude and tries to befriend Shinigami. I really wish she'd kept her memories after leaving the labyrinth, but alas, that's not how it turned out. Fubuki then appears again in Chapter 4. Her forte is used to get Amapal past the high voltage panels to check on Dr. Weska. When Yako was stabbed, she tried to rewind time, but wasn't able to push back far enough. She ends up feeling guilty for not being strong enough to save him. Later on, she is devastated by Yako's death and can't stop crying. Then Fubuki isn't seen in Chapter 5 because literally no one is there except Yuma, Shinigami, Kurumi, and Makoto. Everyone is gone. They went on vacation. Just kidding, they were actually knocked out and held somewhere else, but anyway. Finally, Fubuki is seen in the epilogue as she's preparing to leave Kanai Ward. She's not very sad to leave because she sees a departure as the start of a new adventure. She thanks Yako for everything before she leaves the city. Fubuki's DLC episode shows her working through the mystery of a man who fell from a roof. She is aided by Desuhiko and Halara in this endeavor. They eventually discover a scheme by a casino to scam people out of their money. This is a very vague summary, but in all honesty, the exact details of the case don't really matter that much. While it's cool to see Fubuki in action with her forte, the whole episode feels like kind of a letdown. It's pretty disappointing. It could have been a great way to display Fubuki's skill as a master detective, but that opportunity was completely missed. Most of the thinking and problem solving is done by Halara and Desuhiko. I think this episode could have been improved by having Halara and Desuhiko far less involved in the mystery, or by just removing them from it entirely. It's supposed to be Fubuki's episode, and yet she hardly really had a chance to shine. It mostly just reinforces the idea that Fubuki isn't skilled as a detective and needs other people to solve things for her. Because of this, it can easily leave players wondering why she's a master detective at all. Basically, I think Fubuki was done seriously dirty by her own DLC episode. I wish her skill and knowledge as a detective had been showcased a lot more. As a master detective, Fubuki's forte is time leap, or the ability to rewind time. Although powerful, it does have a couple limitations. For one, if time has been rewound once, it can no longer be rewound past that point. It also takes a toll on Fubuki's body, causing heavy fatigue and headaches if it's used too much. Fubuki seems to think her forte is her only real strength because of how naive she is compared to other people. She often doubts herself as a detective, even going so far as to think she's completely useless without her forte in the Mystery Labyrinth. The ability to rewind time comes along with the ability to undo death. Fubuki feels a heavy responsibility because of this. She wishes she had gone to the roof roof with Yuma because maybe then she could have prevented Shachi's death. In Chapter 4, she feels awful when she's unable to stop Yako from getting stabbed. If some kind of tragedy happens, her ability to rewind time means she's often left wondering if there was something she could have done to stop it. Multiple times, she wishes she was stronger so she could prevent something bad from happening. I think Fubuki's forte is the most poorly utilized of all the fortes in the game. Halara, Desuhiko, and Vivia's fortes were all used pretty well, and they fit the cases and circumstances. But the game completely missed an opportunity to use Fubuki's time leap during an investigation. She could have gone to the roof with Yuma and used her forte if the peacekeepers broke through the door. Instead, her forte goes unused, and the peacekeepers at the door feel like a comically insignificant threat because they never actually do anything. In summary, Fubuki's power is very cool, and I like how it influences her personality and development. I just really wish it was utilized better. Fubuki is the heiress to the Clockford family, which is famous for managing the world standard of time. Fubuki describes her family's goal as to protect the world's time. It's possible Fubuki's time powers have a hereditary element. When the mystery labyrinth opens and time freezes, she's not at all surprised or startled by it. She says occurrences like that aren't unusual for the Clockfords. This implies other members of her family can control time in some way or have encountered anomalies with time. Fubuki grew up extremely sheltered and pretty much never left the mansion where she lived. She says her parents were very busy and she hardly saw them as a child. When Yuma asks about the biggest gift she's ever received, she tells him about a time that she went stargazing with her parents. She also says her father bought a star for her, which I don't know how that would work, and it doesn't quite make sense because nobody owns the stars, but whatever. Fubuki's parents were the ones that enrolled her in the WDO so that she could gain some worldly experience. She describes it as them practically kicking her out because they didn't want her to be so naive, which sounds odd to me because they were her parents. Weren't they the ones that raised her that way? But I guess they hardly raised her at all since she says she barely saw them growing up. At first, Fubuki seems a bit sad when talking about her parents kicking her out, but she enjoys her time as a detective and she's grateful for the experience she's gained. She's not sure if she'll truly become the next head of the Clockford family. At the end of her gumshoe gab, she decides to forge her own path forward instead of following her family's traditions. Fubuki describes herself as an adventurer and she's constantly excited for new things. She knows she's inexperienced, and because of this, she's fascinated by the outside world, describing it as bright and shiny. She wants to experience as much of the world as she can. Even when she's wrong about something, which happens pretty frequently, she's not really upset by it, and she's just happy to learn something new. She sees solving mysteries as a detective as similar to going on adventures. When she first sees the mystery labyrinth, she's excited and wants to explore it, even thinking that there's a treasure to be found. At one point, Yuma says that curiosity about the unknown is what drives Fubuki, and given her very sheltered upbringing, there's a lot of things she doesn't know. Her desire to learn, grow, and improve contributes to her decision to forge her own future instead of following her family's traditions. To summarize, Fubuki is a pretty great character. She has a lot more depth than you might think because first impressions kind of lead you to think she's just a dumb airhead. Fubuki is one of my favorite characters in the game. Granted, I like most of the characters, but she's definitely pretty high up there. I love her. She's great. Even if she's a little stupid sometimes. I really wish her forte was used in the Chapter 3 investigation, and also that Halara and Desuhiko weren't featured so heavily in her DLC. It would have been great to truly see her in action as a detective, but the game unfortunately just never really gave her that chance. In conclusion, I love Fubuki Clockford. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more analysis-type videos on characters from Raincode, and I already have one on Makoto and another on Desuhiko. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.